Hi guys, it's Steph here from the Novelty Corner, and today I'm here with my top 10 books for 2019. It's kind of an arbitrary list because I did read 380 books and it's kind of hard to narrow down to just a small list, but these are the ones that really stuck with me all through the year. The majority of them are 5-star reads. Some of them I did not give 5-star reads to when I first reviewed them, but on reflection and considering how much time I've spent thinking about them over the last year, I've included them in this list because they're the books that have really stood out. The way that I'm going to do this, they're not in any particular order. I don't have a number one, but I have a top 5 that are sort of interchangeable, and then I have sort of like the extra 5 honorable mentions, and then I also have a couple of series that I just wanted to mention because even though the books didn't actually make it into my top 10, I enjoyed the books immensely as a series and I wanted to include them here as well. I don't think there'll be too many surprises in this list, especially if you've been watching any of my videos throughout the year, but we'll just start talking about them and see where we go from there. In an Absent Dream by Sean Maguire. This is book 4 in the Way We're Children series. This is a series about children who go through portal doorways into their own worlds that really match their personality, whether they are chaos worlds or ordered worlds or a combination of both. These children, however, inadvertently find their way back to the real world and they don't know how to deal with that. The first book, Every Heart a Doorway, introduces a place where these children can go to recover and be with people like them who have experienced those things. But most of these now adults or young adults are trying to find their way back to their world. And this book dealt with a world that includes a goblin market, and that was so fascinating and so interesting and really well done. I can't wait to continue the series. My copy of the next book is on its way. I'm so excited. I'll probably be picking that one up as soon as it arrives. Return to Stringy Bark Creek by Carly Lane. This is book 3 in the Callahan's of Stringy Bark Creek series. It is adult women's fiction / romance, small town, country, etc. And I have loved this trilogy since it first came out, and I really love Carly Lane's work. She's got a great writing style. It's very easy to read and just sort of fall in love with the characters. I picked the last book because it is the conclusion to the series, and I actually really liked the conclusion to the series. It does have a nice wrapped up ending, and we get to see all of the characters from the previous 2 books as well in here, as well as the family members who've been in all of the different books. And it follows Hadley, who is a foreign correspondent, and she has just split up from her husband, and the circumstances around that are quite traumatic for her and for her family. But she hasn't told them what has gone on. She's just come home and she's trying to escape the reality for a little while. And there she catches up with childhood friend Oliver Dawson, who is a farmer on one of the neighbouring properties. They grew up together. They were really good friends. Oliver loved her growing up, but let her go so she could chase her dreams. And now that they're back, they decide to rekindle something, and it is just beautiful. The Dry by Jane Harper. This was the year that I picked up Jane Harper after kind of being terrified to read her work. I know that so many of my friends love her and so many of my family members love her as well, but my sister and I decided to read The Dry together while we were waiting for a plane trip up to Palm Cove, and we were literally reading it at exactly the same time. We started it. She had a physical book. I decided to read it on my Kindle. Yeah, we both just fell in love with it. Then we made my mum read the book, and then we read the second book, Force of Nature, and I'm so glad that I finally picked up Jane Harper's work because it's great. And this is the first of the Aaron Falk books, and in this one, Falk is a federal police officer. He deals in fraud, but he goes home to a small country town for the funeral of a friend from his childhood. And while he's there, the parents of his friend ask him to look into the death because they don't believe that it happened the way that it did. So even though he's not that kind of police officer, he sort of is intrigued by the circumstances, and it's just very atmospheric and it's very Australian, and I loved it. The next book on my list is Storm of Locusts by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is book 2 in the 6 World series, which is an urban fantasy kind of dystopian type story that has a lot of Native American mythology and thinking woven into it, and it's great. Its own voices. This story follows Maggie, who is a bounty hunter, and she hunts monsters within a designated space. So in this world there was a great flood, I think it was, and a lot of the world is underwater, so the face of the earth has changed, and she lives in a very designated area, and there's rules about how far you can go and whatnot. and within these borders she hunts monsters. In book 1 we meet all of the characters, and in book 2 we discover that one of the characters that Maggie had a really strong connection with has gone missing, and she decides to set out to find him. And along the way she is also saddled with a young girl who has pretty much lost everything and now accompanies Maggie everywhere she goes, and Maggie doesn't really know how to deal with that to begin with, but it is fantastic. There are so many strong female characters in this series, and I adore it, and I can't wait for the next book. Book number 6 is Moon Called by Patricia Briggs, which is the first book in the Mercy Thompson series, which I've been meaning to read for the longest time. I finally picked it up. The only reason I'm not including it in my series is because I've only read the first 2 books. It is an adult urban fantasy series. It follows Mercy Thompson, who is a walker, and a person who has the ability to shift into the form of a coyote. And she works as a mechanic in the Tri-Cities area, and she lives in, well, I'm assuming it's like a caravan, a trailer. She lives right next door to the property of the local wolf alpha. And the two have sort of this, I don't want to say acrimonious because it's not quite that bad, but they like antagonizing one another. Mercy delights in making sure that the part of her property that faces his doesn't always look the cleanest when he's annoyed her, and that just exacerbates the situation. This is a book that has werewolves, it has shifters, it has fae, it has vampires, and it is fantastic. So I do highly recommend it, and I will be continuing the series in 2020. Okay, so now we're into my top 5 books. Again, like I said, they're in no particular order because I like them all for very different reasons, and they're just books that have really stood out for me this year. The first one I want to talk about is one that probably won't surprise anyone because I keep bringing it up, is The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics by Olivia Waite. This is a female-female historical romance book, and it is just beautiful. We open the book with Lucy, who has just experienced the sham wedding of her lover, and she decides to escape all of this because she just can't stand the thought of living and having to see her lover every day with a man. She ends up with an opportunity to do some groundbreaking translation for the Countess of Moth, whose husband has passed away. Lucy has always had an interest in astronomy, and she worked with her father before he passed, and to translate this work would be a really great achievement, not just for the scientific community, but also for women, because she believes that she's the best person to translate this work. And she really goes out of her way to convince the Countess of Moth to back her and support her, and then to introduce her to the society of men who actually have all the say in this industry. Lucy stays with the Countess of Moth, Catherine, and from there they begin to realize an attraction for one another, and it just is so wonderful. I can't say that word enough because it kept me captivated the whole way through, and I don't like historical fiction, generally speaking, so that's saying something. Another book that I didn't expect to be on my list at all is 488 Rules for Life by Kitty Flanagan, which is sort of a humor / self-help-ish type book, which is all about the rules that you need for life to survive as a decent human being and not piss other people off. It's great. It's so true, everything in the book. I don't have it here because it's still out on loan to someone. It's one of those books I read from cover to cover in one sitting, and I was laughing and marking things up and going, yep, that's totally me, and yep, I totally do that, and yeah, more people need to do that. There's everything from rules on bathroom etiquette to fruit to books and movies, and it was just great. If you want something that's going to make you laugh and make you smile, this is definitely the book to pick up. Next, I want to talk about The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I've only just read recently and you've heard me gush over. It is a literary urban fantasy-esque story about Zachary, who as a child stumbles across a doorway in a brick wall, and he makes a decision not to open it. And then many years later, he discovers a very old book in a library. And as he starts reading this book, he comes across a story that is the story of that moment in his life where he found that door and he never opened it. So he finds his life being written in this book. From there, he begins to discover that perhaps there is more going on in the world than he first thought. It is a story with portal doorways. It is a story that is about a love of books and of literature, and it is just mesmerizing and beautifully written. It is not for everyone because it does place a lot of emphasis on the story, not so much necessarily on the characters, but I loved it. It was gorgeously written. I loved it so much that I picked up a second copy of it. So now I have 2 lovely copies of this book, one in paperback and one in hardcover, and I don't regret that at all. It will come as no surprise that Red, White and Royal Blue is on this list. This is by Casey McQuiston. It is a new adult contemporary book following the relationship between the son of the first female president of the United States and the Prince of England, and their enemies to lovers sort of relationship that is just adorable and cute and very, very sweet. Alongside the really lovely romance in here, you have the political machinations of being the president and running for re-election and the stress that that puts on families, but also the way that if you are dedicated to something, you can make whatever you need to do work. And I love this book so much. I've read it twice. I will be rereading it again in 2020 without a doubt. So just read it if you haven't. It is great. And the last book in my top 5 is one that I never actually expected to be in here, and that is Into the Drowning Deep by Mara Grant. This is a, I don't know, paranormal horror sort of story. It is really about murdery mermaids, and I loved it. It is a very dark, very deeply atmospheric story that will give you some chills because it takes place on a boat in the middle of the ocean where things in the water are trying to kill everyone. And yes, they can get into the boat. We find out at the beginning of the book that 7 years earlier, a ship went off to the Mariana Trench to film a mockumentary on mermaids. Every single person on that ship disappeared without a trace, and no one really knows why. In the present day, a new crew has been assembled based off new footage, and they head out to find out what happened to the crew and also to document everything that happens. What they discover is not what they thought, and it is a lot scarier. And I love this. It's one of those books that has stayed with me all year. Every now and then I just catch myself thinking about it, which is why, even though I didn't give it 5 stars at the time of reading, I've put it in my top list and in my top 5 because I just keep coming back to it, and it's one I do want to reread because I think I need to unpack it some more. Okay, so really quickly I want to just talk about a couple of different series that I loved this year, which will come as no surprise to anyone. These aren't in any particular order either because I love them equally. The first is The Diviners by Libba Bray, which I started late this year and fell absolutely head over heels in love with. It is an alternate historical fiction set in New York, I think in the 20s-ish, and it has people with powers and ghosts, and it's just incredible. The Kate Daniels series by Lona Andrews, which is an urban fantasy series set in Atlanta, I think, and it is a world where there's been a magical shift. So part of the time the world functions as normal, but when the magic rises, the technology tends to fail and lots of monsters come out when the magic is high. Our main character, Kate Daniels, is someone who goes out and hunts the magical creatures that come out when magic is high, and she's been trained to do so. And then she crosses paths with Curran, who is the Beast Lord of Atlanta, and that basically means he's the alpha of his pack. It's all the shifters in the area, so he's sort of like a king. And the two of them have a very playful, very funny relationship that develops over the course of the first couple of books. And then you get a whole lot of side characters, and it's a lot of the side characters that I love immensely. But the whole story is just good fun, and there's lots of magic and lots of magical creatures, so definitely one to check out. The Tea Dragons books by Katie ONeil, which are beautiful, beautiful graphic novels that have these wonderful creatures called tea dragons, who are little dragons who grow tea leaves out of their head. And if you make tea from the tea leaves, then you get to experience things in a different way. Both books follow characters who are diverse and who have really interesting backstories, and I love it. It is so cute, and I've got to go and get my copies back from school because the preps won't be reading it and I can put them back on my shelves. But I absolutely love these books. The Lockwood & Co. series by Jonathan Stroud. No one will be surprised that this is on here. This is a middle grade / young adult horror paranormal series about ghosts and ghost hunting, and it is just delightful. Now, this is going to fall, I can just tell. But this year I did catch up on the books in the Expanse series. The only one I haven't read yet is Tiamat's Wrath, which I'm just waiting for the book to come out in this size, and I believe that's at the end of January, so I'm very excited because then I can keep reading. This is a space opera, obviously set in space, but humans have gone out, colonized Luna, Mars, and the Belt, and they've opened doorways and gateways into other universes, and the whole thing is just incredible. The main cast of characters is amazing. What can I say? I adore this series. So those are my top books for 2019. In the comments below, let me know what were some of your favorite books of the year. I won't ask you to pick a top book unless you have one, in which case feel free to put your top book down below, but what were some of the books that you really enjoyed? I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.